Good. Thank you so much. And good evening, everyone, and thank you for your patience. I have asked for some 15 minutes tonight so that we can properly conclude the previous session that I had. So tonight, we're still talking about proposal writing, and we are going into the deep details. So I would encourage you to have your pen and paper ready if you are interested in the writing process, because that is what we are going into. Yesterday, we spoke of, let me just browse you quickly through. We spoke of the different donor fundings, the NGOs. We spoke of the difference between fundraising and fund development. FDC stands for Fund Development and Communication. I just gave you the difference between the long term and the short term and the different levels. And then we spoke about resource mobilization at length. And what we said is you have to have an understanding of resource mobilization in order for you to understand where proposal writing then fits in. So I'm taking you through, put you through this today. And yesterday we quickly looked at it, and then we looked at why grant proposals fail. And we said when you are not following instructions, when the budget does not match the narrative, when the target group is not clearly defined, and we said funders fund solutions to problems and not activities. They fund solutions to problems and not activities. And then we say that when there's a lack of a plan, so that is where we ended. And then tonight we are talking about writing the grant proposal. Now, the basics of proposal writing are all the same. They're all practically the same. And it just depends on what type of proposal you are writing. So when you are into writing, it's always very good to understand that you only there if you are good at writing, or if you are passionate about writing proposals, the only thing you need to do is to understand the technicality in the different types of proposals. So grants lead the way to innovation and fund development of new projects, interventions, educational programs, or research projects that might otherwise be unaffordable. So what we are saying is it helps you to develop funds, and it helps you to innovate when you want to do new projects and you don't have enough funding. And they support needy communities by uplifting them from poverty and building their incomes and infrastructure. Now, when we say they support needy communities, I also want you to have a broader mindset around this. We are not only looking about a small community, like in my country, we've got different levels of community, or we have the smallest community could be a constituency, and then we have a district, then we have region, and then we have national. These are the different levels. So from national level, you have regional level, then you have district level, and then community level. So when we say support needy communities, we can speak of it from different levels, and also from different sectors as well. So it uplifts the communities from poverty, it builds incomes, it builds infrastructure. And grant proposals often acts as a stamp of approval, attracting further investment or support from other sources. When you listened and followed me for the past few weeks or the few days that we have spoken, you will learn that once you are able to obtain a grant, it can attract or it can build credibility. There was a question last week where somebody asked, how do you justify credibility when it's your very first time when you are submitting a proposal or writing a grant? And what I said yesterday is, it's important to build relationships. The building of relationships is very important. Sorry, I was just quickly distracted. It's important to build relationships, it's important to build partnerships, and it's important to recognize stakeholders, because that is also credibility. It's just like building credibility for a good reference for a good job, or for good funding, or for an award that you are entering into. It's the same principle. So successfully obtaining a grant can raise your organization or your project's profile. It brands you further than your existing brand. It increases visibility, it increases credibility. However, grant writing is challenging because of its complexity, time-consuming effort, and uncertainty of its success. Besides, the changing demands of donors further intimidate the process. So that is also what we need to bear in mind. 5 years ago, the demands of donors were different from the demands of donors today. Before COVID-19, in the entire world, the demands were different. Before Ukraine and Russia war, the demands were different. Before Israel war and Hamas, the demands were different. So whatever changes happen in nations, the demands are different. Before the wars or the coup d'etats and the change in governments in West Africa, the demands of donors were different. Sometimes before your elections, or before we call it before the current government, when there's a new government coming into place, the demands are different. The demands are different. So we need to bear that in mind. And I'm going to talk to you about that shortly. Now, a complex, successful grant proposal speak of a complex process. I want to take out the word complex. Complex you will only use when you are not used to, when you look at it as a mountain, when you are scared or intimidated. But it's a process that requires a combination of creativity, research, and attention to detail. Creativity, research, and so if you look at creativity, that is you bringing yourself in your creative, your cognitive skills, your innovative skills, and we call it your creative juices in the world of donor funding or proposal writing. And research, anybody can do research. You just need to know the technicalities around doing research, and attention to detail. Attention to detail, very important. I remember one day in one of our courses that we were doing at I once did a course at the University of Stellenbosch, that is in South Africa, and the lecturer just asked us in a question that we needed to answer, and that was a foundation of a course. And the question was, everyone should write the number of steps you climb. When you climb the steps, you know, universities has got all these steps that you come up before you enter the main hall, the number of steps you climb before you enter the main hall. And it was his way of looking at our attention to detail. Now, many times you run up those steps because you are a few seconds, you want to come a few minutes earlier, or you want to do one or two things. You never get to count how many steps. And that is the attention to detail that is required when you are writing proposals. And understand the key elements of a compelling grant proposal is very, very essential. I said compelling. There are proposals and there are compelling proposals. The compelling proposals are the ones that attract the attention of the donors. Now, every problem is an opportunity for a solution. I said on the first day, when it comes to coming up with a project, it all starts with an idea. An idea. How do you develop that idea when you see a problem? Simple, when there's a problem with water in the community, you begin to think of how you can solve that problem, and you brainstorm thoughts and ideas as to how you can solve a problem. And that is what I'm talking about. Every problem is an opportunity for a solution. Let me tell you a secret. You get paid in life for the type of problem that you are solving. You get paid in life for the type of problem that you are solving. Everyone in an organization is sitting on an element, on an area where he is dealing with an issue that would be a problem when there is no such position. So it all starts with an understanding of finding out what the problems are. And that is why I always encourage people. When something happens in a nation, we live in Africa, you hear this minister did this, and there's fraud, and there's whatever. Everyone goes onto Facebook and they start typing. You know, last week it was the president of Kenya. People were saying, he said this, he said that, he said that, it's like that, it's like that. They do this, they do that, they do A, they do C. And nobody writes solutions. I always look at how people look at solutions or how they address problems. Nobody wrote in all the rude things they wrote about the president of Kenya and about the nation of Kenya. Nobody wrote solutions. Everyone encouraged the young people. Yes, you are doing well. Go up in arms, rebel if you need be. Even people that were in countries that had worse presidents. Nobody wrote solutions for these young people. And something happened that rarely happens in Africa. The president listened to their demands. He withdrew the policy, the taxation policy that caused the problem. He fired almost half of his cabinet. He's making changes. And that was very abrupt because it rarely happens in Africa. My question is, if they get all their demands met, what next for them? What are they prepared? Who is advising them? So what I'm saying to us is, when it comes to solving problems, be a person that thinks futuristic, number one, and number two, your work should always be solution-based because you get paid in life for the problem you are solving. And that is why you find in my country, we call people that are laborers, blue-collar workers, and people that are in offices or in professional positions, we call them white collar. White collar gets more paid. Why? Not because of your qualifications, but because the level of problem you solve, you're using your brain beyond the individual that is using labor. Back to proposal writing. Every problem is an opportunity for a solution, opportunity for you to obtain funding. So that is how you need to approach this proposal writing. The first thing you need to do is to do research. You have to do research. Identify potential funding sources. Funding sources that align with your project or organization's objectives. This can include government agencies. I'm not going to go through that. Yesterday we spoke of government, we spoke of private sector, we spoke of corporate giving programs, but this is an example. Review funding guidelines, very, very important. I was busy onboarding a new person. We've got an organization that functions through cabinet. So I was onboarding this person. She's very eager to write, and she's an extremely good writer, but she does not look at the guidelines of the funding. So you need to pay attention to eligibility criteria. Eligibility criteria I explained yesterday is, it will tell you we need this project funds women and youth. This project funds individuals in a particular region. This project only funds women and youth in that particular region or county that are involved in agriculture. So these are eligibility criteria, and they will say which countries are involved or engaged. You know, there was a week when I was looking at funding. Yesterday I gave an example by Netflix and all these big entities, and I discovered that there was one that only fund people, community projects, or not community, I think it's youth development in Liberia. I was so shocked to see that, because you never connect this particular not enterprise, industry to Liberia. But no, when you are a person who like to pay attention to detail, you get to discover things that people don't ordinarily know. So you must also look at the funding priorities. What are the priorities that they are funding? Funding orphans and vulnerable children, funding the mental health and psychosocial support, funding maybe education. These are their priorities. And application deadlines, very important. Sometimes there are 3 deadlines, but those 3 deadlines are not necessarily deadline for final submission, but there could be a deadline for a first submission. I always encourage people, if there are 3 deadlines, October, last group, August, second group, and June, first group, aim for June, because then you give the donor an opportunity to do a back and forth process with you and ask you to correct certain things, get certain things in place so that you can qualify for final submission in October. So very important to ensure that your project meets their requirements. And then secondly, you research past grants. Get a sense of their priorities and the types of projects that they support. So there's always, in every grant proposal, they have a website. Go to the website. There's always a column where they say we in past successful grants, and then you will read, okay, they funded maybe they funded the Ministry of Education, or they funded Project Hope, or they funded Save the Children, or they funded maybe regional psychosocial support initiatives. And then you read what they are funding. And within the reading, you will also be able to extract different things that you might be able to put in your proposal. For example, maybe you were just asking for funding for education of girls to finish grade 12, and you were maybe asking just for school fees and maybe school uniforms. People love to ask school fees, school uniforms, and transport. But then you see that they also fund hostel fees. I don't know if you have a system of children staying in hostel schools, but maybe you see they also fund hostel fees. And then maybe you see they also fund, for example, a study tour to a particular university for them. So then you will know what to put in yours, and also innovate, come up with some innovation, modify and combine and see what is needed in your area. So it's easier to compare, it's easier to know what to include and what not to include. In the eligibility criteria, they will also tell you what they do not fund. And that is the beauty of, I said yesterday in research thinking, when we say 15 were responded to the questionnaires, 15 nurses in the PMTCT unit responded to the questionnaires, and it was 15 out of 50. And then they will tell you 35 did not respond, and out of all, you can say 30 did not respond, and 5 were, were spoiled, whatever, or damaged, or they declined. So whatever happened. So that is what they do. They always tell you eligibility and non-eligibility. Study the non-eligibilities as well. Research past grants, use online resources, utilize online resources such as grant databases and search engines to identify additional funding opportunities that may be a good fit for your project. The most popular is Funds for NGOs, and I'm a member of Funds for NGOs, and they can release close to 500 daily across the world. Sometimes it goes up to 1,000 per day. If you look at all the different countries, you never have that time. But there was a time when I had to spend a week just looking at how they function. So I'm a member of Funds for NGO. There's also NGOs in Africa. There's very many different platforms where you can look at funding as well. So you need to study the different resources. Do not only work with one online resource. Study so that you can have an idea of how they are operating, what are their priorities. Secondly, understand application requirements. Now you've done your research, you've read a bit, and what I love about proposal writing is when I say teamwork, you will understand teamwork. There will always be one person that is very, very good at doing that kind of research. And when you are connected to stakeholders, you will always hear at your national stakeholder platforms Save the Children as a request for proposals, and we are going to submit. We are 5 NGOs together. We are going to submit, and we are going to look at priority areas 1, 3, and 5, and then you must see whether you fit into that, and maybe propose priority area number 4, because that is yours, but you are also part of the consortium. Understand the requirements, read the guidelines thoroughly, take notes on the key requirements and deadlines. If you don't understand the guidelines, take every word and put it into Google and understand the meaning. Take notes on the key requirements and deadlines. This will help you to stay organized and ensure that you don't miss anything important. Contact the funding organization. They are often willing to provide guidance and answer your questions you may have. Now, this is not difficult. You are a team. Delegate assignments and say, we meet every week on Tuesday at 11:30 in the boardroom, and we discuss our progress. And in terms of contacting the funding organization, the change in the scope of donor funding is as follows. You no longer have to contact them immediately. Your first contact might just be more information. However, they have websites, but they always have dates where they have webinars where they discuss the proposal. So there would be somebody that would tell you what the request for proposal is all about. You make sure that somebody on your team attend. If everybody can attend, beautiful, because sometimes we understand things differently and we help each other to understand. So they do a webinar and they will have 3 webinar dates. If there are 3 deadlines, there are 3 webinar dates. And then they will tell you, you can start submitting from this particular date. Within the webinar, they will tell you everything. They will explain the requirements that you are reading or you need to read. And after that, if you go back to all the requirements and the criteria, then you will understand it much better. The advantage of attending, they always keep a list of the organizations that attended, that connected. Remember, when it's a Zoom meeting, you sign up for the meeting and your details go to them. And then always send them an email and say, thank you for the webinar. I've learned A, B, C, E, and then I have a follow-up question, because they always give space for questions within the webinar. So if you didn't have a chance to get your question answered, you can just tell them, I haven't understand this, and that is how you establish a relationship with a donor. So they are always willing to provide guidance. Take the names of the individuals or the contact persons when you continue with it. Then you must understand the requirements. Plan ahead, but before planning, as part of planning ahead, once you understand the requirements of the grant application, create a timeline. That is what we mean by the plan for completing each step of the application process. Now, remember, some of you would come to me and say, there is this proposal, and you give it to me on Monday, and the closing date is Friday. That is a no-go area, a no-brainer. We call it a no-brainer, because I also need time to understand, to look through it. But what I always try to do is to get behind your brain, to understand what exactly you want and why you are applying, but versus what you have written down. So it's very important, planning ahead, have a plan. So today, if you are going and something deadline on Friday and you do not have proposals ready and you are not into proposal writing, it will be close to a miracle if you get that thing, unless it is something that is very simple and very structured and you are able to fit into that. Like I said again, if you have nothing ready, then it's likely that you may not get the fund, or you may not even be on time, or you may submit with a lot of loopholes in meeting the criteria. So you must, once you understand the requirements, you must understand the requirements. And then you create a timeline for completing each step. In your timeline, you have a team. It's not a one-man show. You delegate assignments to individuals, and then you get back together. And then be sure to give yourself plenty of time. I've just spoken about that. To gather necessary documentation and complete the application before the deadline. Now, If you only concentrate on writing the proposal and submitting it, you are still not on track because there is documentation that you need to get. If you are leading the writing process, please make sure that you are the one who get all the documentation before you even go into the writing process. What documentation are we talking about? The registration of your organization or of the organization, if it requires, or it always requires registration, by the way, but if it is a registered organization, maybe your constitution, and they always ask for finance reports. They always ask for, yes, registration, constitution. They always ask for your project document, sorry. They always ask for those. So the basic, somebody that has gone through, you assign one individual, get all the documents. But I would suggest that if you are the lead in the proposal writing process, you are the one who makes sure you have all the documents. Your project document as well. Be sure you give yourself plenty of time. We spoke about that. And then project planning. Okay, the planning that we're referring to here is just the process of writing. We've just spoken about that. Clearly outline your project plan. When applying for a grant, it's important to clearly outline your project plan, including your goals, your objectives, your methods, and expected outcomes. In this process, there is there's no turning back here. They want to know, what are your goals? What are your objectives? What are your methods and your expected outcomes? Very important. I said I think yesterday or was it last week, I said, always write with the end reader in mind. So if you are writing to me, write in a way that you are talking to me and telling me in a way that you feel I will understand. The best way, simple, clear, and concise. We don't want ambiguous, big English words, and it's not necessary. As long as the end reader understands. That is all. They will never look at the quality of your English. They will look at the clarity of your proposal. So you have clear goals. We spoke of SMART yesterday. SMART objectives, methods, and expected outcomes. Now, define your goals and your objectives. Defining the overall goals of your project, specific objectives you hope to achieve, and it will help you to stay focused, even yourself. Do not have one person working on goals, another person working on objectives, and another person, and then you just write. No. Be structured as you are writing. Define your goals. Make sure the goals and objectives are clearly understood by everyone in the writing process, because they will help you to put the brains together. Describe your methods. Describe your methods you will use to achieve these objectives. And this may include specific activities. Remember, I said in the beginning, if your activities are clear, then you are telling me what you are going to do. A simple example when you describe your methods is, let me just think of one of the projects that I had. We implemented a project for adolescent mothers, withdrawing them from child marriages and putting them back into school. Okay. And the project was mental health and psychosocial support, and also addressing reproductive health issues. So what were the specific activities that we conducted? We trained 36 teachers in 10 constituencies in the Kunene region, and we trained them in mental health and psychosocial support. Now that is also broad, but the training included, one of the trainings included psychosocial support, environmental assessments in the school. So that was a health promotion activity. So the specific activity, there was a training of 10 teachers in the Tree of Life program, which is mental health, psychosocial support. Another specific activity was, we trained again 20 teachers in addressing psychosocial issues with young people. And a third one was establishing of clubs in schools. We call them psychosocial life skills clubs in schools, establishing of counseling support groups in schools. So we established in 10 schools, we established one group per school, and we took them through 6 weeks project. So all these things, everything in sentences, in your specific activities. Why? These are all activities that are going to be funded. You are asking for money. So I need to know what I need to give this money for. And okay, so specific activities, specific programs or interventions that you will implement. So these are some of the things. Another activity was we conducted community engagement sessions in 10 constituencies in the Kunene region. And these engagements were conducted with chiefs, traditional leaders, traditional authorities. And yeah, so now you take that down, what I've told you now, and you explain it to them in sentences so that they can see what needs to be funded. So we're going to talk about that more when we get to the budget. And then identify your target audience. Identify your target audience. In this case, the target audience were the first group was our school learners. We targeted 300 learners, and we targeted 20 teachers. Our target group was 100 traditional authorities. So these are our target audience. But we started with adolescent mothers, so that in the overall proposal, it will be for adolescent mothers. But in every training, you will indicate in the smaller context your target audience. So adolescent mothers in the Kunene region targeted about 300 of them. What did we do? How did we get to 300? We conducted a baseline study, and at the end, which will then qualify an endline study. So there were specific things that we needed to do. Remember, we said feasibility study first. First, we did a feasibility study, a community profile, which culminated into us doing a baseline study as well. And we targeted then 300 at the end of the day. And these 300 were in 10 schools. So we targeted 10 schools, 20 teachers, 2 per school. So that is how it goes down. Consider who your project will serve, okay? And describe your target audience. Now you describe, the description is very, very important. Okay, we have said adolescent mothers. Now you have to describe these adolescent mothers. They are the adolescent mothers in the Kunene region. They're engaged in child marriages. In other words, these are adolescents that are married off. They are married off to much older men, and they had to leave school because they became mothers. So that is the profile that you are giving them. And most of them, you will say predominantly grade so and so, and then you give a percentage of, because you have to break down when you say predominantly, it's not a word that you use in proposal writing, but predominantly, and then you go into the detail. This may include specific demographics. That is just what I gave you, geographic locations. You give the names of the 10 villages or other relevant characteristics. Relevant, they are married off, they are mothers, and they left school. So our aim was to get them back into school, back into education, and so on. But there's a different way you can also identify your target audience. Yesterday, I gave an example. If it's a youth entrepreneurial project, you will identify your target audience will be young people from the Kunene region, between age, let's say 15 to 25, or you can say, yes, 15 to 25. Maybe you can just, that is a description. You've described the region, the area, the age, the geographic location. You've described all that. So that is demographic description of your project. And then outline expected outcomes. Clearly outline the expected outcomes of your project. Indicate short-term and long-term impacts. This may include changes in behavior, increased awareness, improved health outcomes. Okay, so ability to demonstrate useful results, indicate understanding, effective utilization of funding. Okay, the changes in behavior, we want at the end, we want about 300 young people in the Kunene region to be integrated back into the education system and completing school, which is grade 12 in our context. Okay, so increased awareness of the importance of education amongst traditional leaders and chiefs and whatever. Improved health outcomes, maybe delayed sexual debut among young people in this particular age group, and so on and so on. So these are the kind of examples of how you describe an outcome. Maybe if it's an education project of getting people back into school, then you can say, or like in my child labor project, 1,000 children has been withdrawn from child labor between 2010 and 2012, and they were integrated back into school, back into education system, you know, or integrated back into families. You want to describe outcomes. So the donor is sitting here and saying families are important. Integrating children back into families are important. So we promote families. So we need to fund that. Child labor is you know, it's even beyond a crime. It's uncalled for. So we don't want children into child labor. So we are going to fund this. And now they come to you closer. Sometimes they even give proposals. Why don't you do a study, and then instead of you only looking at 3 regions, why don't you look at 5 regions? You know, and instead of you just training a community project or funding a community project to execute, why don't you train law enforcement officials according to the ILO standards? You know, and then when it's law enforcement officials, maybe you have 5 law in our country. We look at, okay, the police. We look at people in the justice profession. Those are lawyers. And then we look at social workers. We also look at teachers because it's children involved in child labor. Then we look at labor inspectors as well. But then we also look at agricultural extension workers because most of the children are in child labor in the agriculture sector. So the ILO came back to us and they asked us to train law enforcement officials in in legal framework pertaining to child protection. So we had a team from Geneva joining us and we conducted the training, and we had leaders within the sectors that I've mentioned to you, and the training was conducted. Now, they were so, let me say, impressed or fascinated by what we wanted to do at that point in time and the need in our country and the research that went into that they themselves suggested we add these trainings. So sometimes you are not always able to articulate it very well, but they can see what you are doing. So remember, a donor should be able to visit you and to visit the project and the project site where you want to implement before they fund you. And that is what we did. And then tailor your proposal. Very, very, very important. Do you know one of the things that will make it very difficult for me to then at the end of the day say, I have helped you with this full proposal, is because you are on the ground. I am not there. Important to demonstrate a strong connection between your project and the funding organization's mission and goals. Here are some tips. Okay, some tips to help you. Number 1, it helps you to highlight your project alliance. Now, remember what we are saying is your project, you must always, that is why we say in the beginning, if I am your donor, look at what I am funding in my, let's say I've got one of my projects that I am on championing is human trafficking in Namibia. Okay. Now you don't come to me and say, no, we want funding for human trafficking. I will sit and listen to you and I want to hear what particularly do you want to fund? Our focus are interceptions. We intercept cases of human trafficking, number 1. Do you want interception, us to fund interception? Do you want us to fund relocation? Because that is part of, after interception comes relocation. Do you want us to fund shelters where you keep individuals that are in transition? Say, for example, a person has been trafficked from the country where they came from, and they are the traffickers who are on the way to Brazil with this person, but they came via my country, Namibia, because Namibia is a peaceful country. We don't have war. There's a lot of things we don't do here that happens in other countries. So it's so easy for people to be trafficked through here. And that is why we have these projects here. So if you tell me you want shelters, I will listen to you. If you tell me you want interception, I will listen to you. If you tell me you want if you want withdrawal of people from trafficking, I will listen to you. If you tell me you want training, I will ask you, because training it's something that will hang in the air. After you've trained individuals, what happens to them? But if you tell me you want training for awareness raising, for example, for law enforcement officials or for just community members, then I will listen to you twice. So the project and the funding organization, the project need to speak to the missions and the goals of the funding organization. Research the funder. Start by researching the funding organization's mission and goals. This will help you understand their priorities and identify areas where your project aligns with their mission. So you must understand, we in our project here, we are funding youth development or youth education. They are also passionate, they are funding education. So we are already in line with that. Identify key areas of alignment. Now you go deeper. Once you understand the funder's mission and goals, identify key areas where your project aligns. This may include specific issues or challenges that the funder is working to address. Maybe in your community, you've seen that they are funding social justice. Now you go for key areas, gender-based violence. Yes, we are also doing gender-based violence in our organization. So that is key. Those are key areas. Highlight shared values. When describing your project, highlight shared values between your organization and the funder. This may include a commitment to social justice, equity, or community engagement. Very important. Do you see the detail that you need to look for if you study your donor? Now, sometimes not all these things will be in the call for proposal. That is why you need to read through the website of the donor. They also fund this, they also fund that, they also fund that. Very important for you to understand your donor that you are requesting money from. Okay. Again, provide evidence. Evidence to support your claims of alignment. This may include data, research, or other examples of successful projects that align with the funder's mission and goals. Some of your write-ups that you've submitted had good evidence. I particularly looked for statistics. So all those of you that included statistics, that is what we call evidence. You need to know what you are talking about. And then also, with evidence, it's very important that when you write, it's just like in research. In research, we say your information should not, unless it requires a historical background, a very deep one. Your information, your should not be older than 5 years. Your information or your statistics. If you cannot get latest statistics, and if it's not a comparative study or comparison of information, it should not be older than 5 years, unless you can really not get information, but mention it in your write-up. Very important. So if it is something that, especially in IT evolves every day. There are new things in ICT, anything related to IT and to AI. If there's something that involves that, you need to have latest statistics. How can you have that if you do not have all the information at country level? You need to understand what is new in the field, what is trending, and then you start from there, and then you take it backward as to where it started. Okay, so it's very, very important that you give us evidence. We want to understand where we can go. Do not only give anecdotal information, people say. No, that is not evidence. Also, beware of news reports. Don't only give news reports, what is in the news or what is in a newspaper. I don't know what newspapers you are having in your country, and it might not appeal to me. I will send it back and tell you, if I'm interested in the project, please provide more information or stronger information. And then demonstrate impact. Finally, demonstrate how your project will have a meaningful impact in the community or issue you are addressing. So this may include specific outcomes or metrics that align with the funder's priorities. Okay. So by sending these people, we will have, for example, if you're sending people funding for proposals to send or to engage people in a course, maybe medical engineering, what will the presence of more medical engineers in your community or in your country, what changes will it bring about over the next period of time, over the next 5 years? You know, because perhaps they're going to study for 4 years, and then when they come back, what changes will it bring? That is how we say we want to see impact. We want to see impact. So here you only demonstrate how your project will have a meaningful impact on the community. You can only demonstrate that in your explanation and in what you want to do. These are what we're looking for in very innovative projects as well, because you have not yet executed it. You're still asking for funding to execute it. But if you have started with a project and there are some reports that you can already give to us, for example, the response of the people and so on, or the response after the first set of trainings that you've done, maybe out of your own pocket, that will also interest the donors. So, and again, by highlighting how your project aligns with the funder's mission and goals, you can demonstrate that you are a strong fit for their funding priorities and increase your chances of securing funding for your project. Very important. Okay, that is how you demonstrate that you are a strong fit. Another way you can do this is visit organizations that are funded by these organizations and find a way of doing some work with them or engage with what they are engaged with. For example, when we worked in child labor, not every second organization working in child labor, you will find that all the organizations that work with very legal issues, they could be very few in the NGO field, in particular in certain communities. There will be more that will work on HIV, on health-related issues. But when it comes to child labor, it's literally the legal field, and you have foreign affairs and everyone involved. So they were not many. And that is one thing. So what we needed to do is we had to demonstrate, in demonstrating that you are a strong fit for the funding priorities and increasing your chances to secure funding for the project. One of the things that was very prominent there was the issue around child labor, child protection, and how we were a strong fit. For example, we were one of the only organizations that were looking into that. And at that time, they were looking for people that wanted to implement projects in child labor. The second thing is we were the only organization that conducted research in child labor at the time. So that also, so we had very little competition, so to speak. And we could even onboard what we called action program service organizations. We could onboard to them the legal organizations that I told you, the legal assistance centers and so on. And we could fund them. We could give money to them. Remember, I gave an example yesterday when the one organization failed. They bought things that they were not supposed to buy. We just shifted everything to the legal assistance center, and they served the community and they executed. That is almost similar to one of the projects that one of you submitted, legal services to the community. But in this case, they are serving the entire community in all human rights issues, for example. And now, secondly, you should showcase expected impact and outcomes. Like we said, expected impact and outcomes, you should find a way of showing what do you expect. Even if it means, if it's a different type of project. I see a lot of projects that people apply for, proposals from Liberia, for example, that has got to do with water. And there's a lot of what do they call it, slides, mudslides, and people drainage systems. And I saw somewhere in one of the international archives that there were a lot of proposals, big proposals that goes that way. So it's important for you to be able to demonstrate what is the outcome, the expected outcome. Even if it's just a simple project where you want to raise awareness. Why do you want people to be more aware of the particular issue that you are addressing? Why? How will it benefit the community if people are more aware? So that is what you need to be able to demonstrate. Showcase impact, start with clear objectives. We said that earlier. And then clearly define the objective of your project, what you hope to achieve. And this will help you to articulate the potential impact. I need to be able to ask you, what is the aim of your proposal? Now, remember, if your project if you have a topic that is needed, if it addresses a need, if it solves a problem, it already attracts interest. If it is a trending or a current issue, number one. Number two, then a donor might be able to do a Skype call with you and ask more questions, always be able to articulate the potential impact. Don't come up with too many things, be clear. Use data and research. Data and research support your claims of potential impact. Now, I've spoken about statistics, and then, okay, outcomes, we spoke about that. Show the relevance, clearly explain why your project is relevant and important. Explain how it addresses a specific need or a problem in the community. Remember, I said it's all about solving a problem. So even if you are busy with a project now, ask yourself, what problem do you want to solve in the community? What problem? And then consider long-term impact. Consider long-term impact of your project and how it will continue to benefit the community or organization beyond the initial project period. Now, this is a secret that you all need to capture. Anything that the community will benefit from beyond the lifespan of that project is something that a donor would want to fund. However, you must be able to demonstrate what will happen after the project has ended. And that is where assumptions come in. I think I mentioned in project management about assumption. When you write your proposal or your project proposal, there's always assumption. The assumption is within the lifespan of the project, within the 2 or 3 years period of time, the community has built enough resilience to continue with the project through. Community gardens will have been established. Maybe diversified fund development will be in place, and all those things. Those are assumptions. And the donor wants to hear your assumptions. Why? They are going to observe with time how you deal with that and what you are doing about it. However, the focus will still only be the 3 to 5 years that they are sponsoring you or that they are funding you. By clearly articulating the potential impact of your project and the expected outcomes, you can demonstrate to funders that your project is worthwhile and has potential to make a meaningful difference. A meaningful difference. Okay? And also in 5.5, where we say, be able to demonstrate beyond, that is where your sustainability strategy speaks forth. Remember, we said in planning, you also come up with a sustainability strategy. Now, you must develop a realistic budget. Very important. Develop a realistic budget. I've been looking at one of the proposals that came in. I looked at the budget. It's just that I didn't see the budget outline, so I couldn't criticize the project. But there are certain projects where you can hear what the person is saying, and then he tells you the budget, how much money they need off their head, and then you see, these two doesn't match. However, it still gives room for asking questions about the budget, brainstorming or interrogating budgets, but develop. The secret is you develop the realistic budget. It's not just a matter of what I've noted with many older people that I've trained in this course. They are not excited about doing a budget for a project. Now, the secret of budget is the activity informs the budget. In other words, you first have your project, and then you see all your activities, your plans and everything, and you cost them. And then it will tell you the quality of budget that you will need. It's not, do I have money? And if you had money, you were not going to write a proposal. Oh, excuse me. So develop a realistic and detailed budget to ensure that you have the resources. There comes resource mobilization. You need to successfully complete your project on time and within budget. Now, these are one of the criteria that the donors spot you at. When you are applying to a donor for the first time and you had funding before from a different donor, that will be a reference to see if you were able to execute budget within time. Identify all costs. Start by identifying all the costs associated with your project. This includes direct costs such as materials, labor, and equipment, as well as indirect costs such as overhead and administrative expenses. So important direct and indirect costs. Now, when it comes to fundraising for both all these costs and all these things, it's always important to have ongoing fundraising activities. That is where fundraising speaks forth. Fund development is now the donor that you are looking at. So these are the elements that you want to budget for. Break down cost by task. Activity in your project plan, every activity in your project plan. This will help you to identify which tasks are more expensive than others. And here you have your finance team on board, you have your project, your grant fund management managers or your management team. If it's a big organization, if it's a smaller organization, you have somebody that does everything. And what you need to do is get even a quotation, even if it means for stationery, for equipment, everything. There's nothing difficult about this. Get quotations and see it with your own eyes. Secondly, you are visiting or you are working with stakeholders, find out from them the estimated budget and what are the issues that are costed there, because by this time you have a team around the table. Use historical data or industry benchmarks to estimate cost for each task. You can also use historical data, however, bearing in mind that things are changing, policies are changing, prices and costs are changing, inflation rates, everything you have to bear in mind. This will help you to ensure that your budget is realistic and aligned with industry standards. So that also important. Okay. Consider contingencies. Include contingencies in your budget to account for unexpected expenses or changes to your project plan. A good rule of thumb is to set aside 10 to 20% of your total budget for contingencies. Every project, sometimes the donor will tell you 20% for contingencies, 40% for administrative costs. Okay, so when it comes to contingencies, these are the unexpected, what you don't expect. The psychological part of the contract, you need to put aside money for that. Contingency, every organization, even every individual should plan for contingency. And that means money that is always there and not necessarily touched. Those are the monies that the donors will comment you for. They'll comment you for these monies. Okay. Review and revise your budget regularly throughout the project to ensure that you are staying on track and making adjustments as needed. Now, before we get to that, when it comes to budgeting, and you have a team and you have different levels in your organization, as a project manager, you need to make sure that you either visit physically every department, have a meeting with them, and tell them to identify needs. Hear me well. Tell them to identify needs. Then whoever is in charge of that department, whether it is just a supervisor or a coordinator, is responsible for gathering the needs and the inputs from those departments and to bring it to the budgetary level where the budget is going to be compiled. Never do a budget on your own and with only managers or only leaders without having consulted the ordinary individuals, starting from your secretary, your receptionist, your cleaner, whoever in your organization need to have a word in the budget. And that is a sense of ownership. Why people waste, why people steal, why there is corruption, because people are not engaged. They don't understand where this budget is coming from that they are sitting on. Make them understand that cost of having you in the organization is about 1 million per year or 500,000 per year. And this is how we get it. So what are your needs? What are your needs? They may not understand everything, but they must know that it's a cost. Them sitting there is a cost. It's part of a budget. So what can we do differently? This is our current situation. You will be surprised how much cooperation you will get from them if you engage them. Like, people respect the organization, they respect the work environment, you know, and there is just, when it comes to cost saving, there was a time in one of my organizations where we had to work towards cost saving because the funding was going to be delayed. Funding was processed every quarter to this particular organization. It was going to be delayed. So I had to talk to all my managers to sit down with their teams and come up with interim budgets, cost-saving budgets. And everyone was able to do that and present. But it was very difficult to implement because people were used to you know, getting things on time. The only thing you should never try to do is don't always fight for them to get their salaries on time, always fight for them to get things on time, despite everything. Now, writing this budget, you're making sure that you have enough in certain areas, whereby areas like we spoke of overheads. Some of the donors will tell you overhead should not exceed 30%, but you will find it gets to 60%, and then 40% is project. So it depends on the type of donor. But an organization where overheads gets to 60%, then you must work really hard in fund development. Everybody. So that is one thing. And then the key issues in budgeting is the activity informs the budget. And in your budget or in your plan, you will calculate everything. Even if you say we are using, even if the organization is using bicycles in a village, the organization already has bicycles, and that activity that they carry out with bicycles costs you nothing as an organization. It must come down in the budget, and there must be a zero next to it. There were, in one of the organizations, we used to get donations from boutiques and you know, shops, very reputable retail shops. I don't know whether you've got Edgar's and Truworths and the Foshinis in your country, but we have that here. So in this particular organization, every second month, we got about $1 million to the value of $1 million donations for all the villages, the children's villages, for all the houses in the villages, for everything that the organization needed. Now, we could not say that is zero income. No, we had to cost everything that came in. We had to cost everything that came in, and it goes down in budget. So in your budget, you will also have, what do you call it? In-kind donations. And you will say 1 million, we get 1 million in from in-kind donations because it's what you need, but you don't pay for it. Okay? In-kind donations. In other words, these donations are not given in the form of money. And if your fund raising is 30 million, your fundraising budget or requirements or targets is 30 million for the year, and that is 12 million, you will say 30 million minus 12 million will be in-kind donations. So these are the kind of things that you will do. Secondly, every donor wants to know, what are you bringing to the table? They want to know, what do you bring to the table? Okay, so what you bring to the table is what you get in kind, your zeros, and what you already have. And then it could also be your knowledge and skills. It could be your building. If you have a building that you bought, you also bring that to the table. It is not true that the donor gives you everything that you need. They always ask, there's always somewhere that they ask, either in the budget or in the project itself template, what is it that you bring to the table? Very, very, very important. Now, I told people there's no way in life where you bring nothing to the table if you want something. It's a law of nature where you also give if you want it to be given unto you, and that comes into play here. So be very conscious of that. Okay, so we've spoken about budgeting and so on. So I'm not going to go into the detail of the process. Tomorrow we can write a bit on the proposal. But for today, I've spoken about the budget, and I think tomorrow we can start on the actual writing. I just want us to ask questions and then we can call it a day. Are there any questions?